Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kelvin Johnson. In this full enhanced video, we are going to build a complete enterprise-ready Windows Server 2025 lab environment from scratch. We're going to be seeing step by step with real-world configuration you need to know as an IT system administrator or IT professional who just start working in the IT field. So we're going to start by building up our virtual lab, downloading and installing Windows client operating system. First of all, we're going to start by installing our virtual machines, installing our Windows servers, also configuring our IP addresses, host name, and server hardening. So we're going to also configure our Windows client operating system, join our Windows client operating system to become a part of our domain environment, configure Active Directory domain service and DNS, and also we're going to be learning about users, computers, group, organizational unit, how to create all these using PowerShell script. You will also be learning how to configure remote desktop using group policy, how to enforce BitLocker across all client operating system, and also how to manage your disk, and also how to perform disk management. You are also going to be monitoring your devices using event viewers and other tools. And also, we're also going to learn how to patch and update our Windows servers and lots more. So if you just started working in the IT field and you want to learn about IT, this video is definitely for you. Well, you don't need to watch this video in one time. You can actually watch it step by step. You can watch the video, pause the video, grab a coffee, maybe probably you can watch it within 1 week, but try and follow up on the training, build your lab, do also some practicals, and then learn how this Windows server works. If you have any question, just leave a comment in the comment section of this video and I'll reply to you as quick as possible. My name is Kelvin Johnson once more. Enjoy the video, and please, if you found anything you think I also need to learn, just leave it in the comment section and I will also learn from you as well. Thank you once more, and let's dive in and see how to install and configure our lab. To become an expert in IT system administrator or IT professional, you will need to build your own lab and train yourself. You will need to do a lot of practicals to become an expert in your field. So we are going to learn how to download the VMware Workstation Professional to be able to configure all our labs. So this is what we are going to be using. We're going to be using VMware during this training process. So first of all, what you want to do is to go to Google and enter download VMware Workstation. Here you can see we have the VMware website, which came as the first, which is Fusion and Workstation. Click on it and it's going to take you to this site. Here you can see the link. It says develop and test for any platform with VMware Workstation Hyper Vsauce. So here you want to click download VMware Workstation Pro for PC, which is going to take you here where you will create an account. You need to create an account with Broadcom and then sign in and then download the VMware Workstation Professional. So after you download it and install it, you can see we have our VMware Workstation Professional. So if I go to help and about, you can see we just installed the version 17 Pro. So next, we're going to be seeing how to actually download and install our Windows Server 2025. To install a Windows Server 2025 on a VMware Workstation Professional, you will need to download it from the official website of Microsoft. So what you want to do is to go to Google and then type download Windows Server 2025. And then here you can see the first link from the official website of Microsoft. So click on it, which is going to take you to this link, to this new browser. And here you can see it says download the ISO. We also have other options where you can try Windows server on Azure, or you can download the VHD. But I actually want to go for the ISO, so I'll just click download the ISO. And then here you need to fill on all the following information and then click download. So it says we need to enter the company size, then click download. And you can see when you click download, it's going to take you to a new browser where you need to select which version you want to download. You can see we have the Windows Server 2025 in different languages. So what you want to do, you want to also check the prerequisites to see if your device meets the requirements for this installation process, because an average Windows Server 2025 will need a minimum of about 4 gigabytes. So let me just do the following system requirements. So here we go. When I click system requirements, it's going to take me to this new link. Here you can see we see the CPU, which says 1.4 gigahertz and compatible with 64 instruction sets, and you can read that on your own. Here we have the RAM. You can see it says 2 gigabytes for server with desktop experience. Of course, 4 gigabytes is recommended because it's going to be more faster when you use 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes. And you can see the storage. We have 32 gigabytes of space. Of course, you want to reserve more. And also you can see the network, so you can read that on your own. Then what you want to do is, for me, I want to download the English version, which is the ISO download. I'm just going to click that, and then it will start the download. So I've already downloaded it in the past, so I'm going to cancel that. And then next, I'm going to show you how to install it on a virtual machine. And please, before I forget, you can actually download multiple. We are going to start the installation process of our domain controller. We are going to be installing 2 domain controller, which is going to be our primary domain controller, and the second one is going to be our secondary domain controller. So if you are working for a company, most companies do have multiple domain controllers. For example, there are 3 domain controllers. So if the first domain controller something goes wrong with the first domain controller, the second one should be available for users to be able to access their resources. So, and again, what I want to show you is the following. You can see if I go to this page, see, you can see I have my C drive, and I also have a D drive. I have a device with about 1 terabyte. So what I did is I created a new disk for my C drive using disk management, so that I can install all my virtual machine on my D drive and not on my C drive, so that it should be easy for me to just delete them if I need to delete them. And also you can see all my required software. I hear my Windows Server and my client operating system. And again, if I go to system information, you can see I have about 32 gigabytes of RAM. So which means if I'm installing my Windows Server, I can use 4 gigabytes of RAM, and I still have a lot. Let's say I installed my 2 domain controller. I'm going to use 8 gigabytes. So I still have a lot of RAM to use, also left for my client operating system and also for my physical device. So what we need to do right now is to start the installation process of our virtual machine. So click create a virtual machine. I'm going to use the typical recommended and click next. So I'm going to do, I will install the operating system later, and we can also install it from a disk, but it is recommended to use, I will install the operating system later. Then click next. And you can see it's going to be a Microsoft Windows, not Linux. And I'm going to select Windows Server 2025. And here I'm going to click next. And I'm going to browse to the location where I want to actually save my virtual machine. Let me go to this PC, and then I can go to the D drive, and then select my first domain controller. So this virtual machine, I'm going to use a standard name, which is going to be LON, which is London, DC for domain controller, and then 01. So for example, you can see the DC. I can also, if it's a file server, I can say FS, and if it's an Exchange server, I can say EX. So here, let's click next. And then I want to actually store the virtual disk in a single file, and I'm going to say just change this from 60 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes. So because my disk will continue to grow as I install multiple software on that virtual machine. So let's click next, and here I can click customize hardware to actually change my memory from 2 to 4 gigabytes so that my device can be a little bit faster. And you can see we have our processor. So number of processor, because this is a lab environment, I'm just going to leave it for 1. I'm going to say, okay, close. But at the same time, you can see we have adapter icon. In the future, we're going to create a second adapter, which we're going to be mounting it to our static IP address, so that we can also use this NAT to also configure our IP address. But I'm going to show you how to create a new network address. For example, you can see the host only, a private network shared with the host. So let's just leave it for NAT, and then click close, and then click finish. So here you can see that the C drive, the C DVD is still actually empty. We've not added our ISO Windows server we downloaded. So click on it. And here I'm going to actually just click use the ISO image file and then browse to it. Then I'm going to browse to the Windows Server 2025, and then it's going to connect at power on. Let me just click OK, and then power on this virtual machine. So when it's powered on, press any key on your keyboard to continue the installation process. So you can see the installation is starting. If you've done this in the past, please, you can actually skip this part of the installation process. But if you are new to IT, to become an IT, if you are new to IT professional, please, you can follow up. No. If you've done this installation process in the past, you can always skip this process and go to the next step. But if this is your first time of installing a Windows Server 2025, you can actually follow this step. So let's start the installation. So right now you can see the language is going to be English, which of course it was English I downloaded. And then the time and currency, I'm going to select the Dutch because I live in Belgium. I'm going to select Dutch and then click next. Here you can see my keyboard is automatically selected, and I'm going to say install Windows Server, and I'm going to say yes, I agree to that. And I'm going to see, you can see we have multiple options. So we have the standard evaluation, we also have the data center. So I'm going to go for the data center evaluation. So if you are installing, for example, a file server, of course, you don't want to use a data center. So I'm going to click next, and then I'm going to accept the license agreement. And here I want to install all my virtual machine on this disk. So I'm going to select it. You can actually create a partition, but I'm going to select it and just click next to start the installation process. And the installation process will begin in a short time. You can see it says we want to install and then want to keep nothing, just start the installation process. So this is going to take some time. You can see it's here about 10% complete. It may go very fast or so, but let's just pause this video and come back again when the installation is complete. So now our installation is almost completed. So let's just enter a password for our administrator account. Please don't forget this password, because you need this password when you want to log onto your device before we need to promote our Windows Server to become a domain controller. So I'm going to enter a password and also enter a new password. So then hit enter to finish the installation. So right now I'm going to actually install a new domain controller. So that is going to be my secondary domain controller, which of course, we're going to be actually promoting both. The first, we're going to promote the first one to become a domain controller, and then we're going to add the second one to also promote it and then add it to become a secondary domain controller. So please go ahead and install the second domain controller. You can always give it a second name. For example, the first letter should be, for example, Belgium, Australia. Then don't forget to add a DC02. So please do that, and then I'll see you in the next video, which of course we'll learn how to harden our Windows Server environment. Now you can see that I've installed both domain controller, the DC01 and the DC02. And for the second one, I just choose ANT, which is Antwerp, and the first one is LON, which is London. So right now you can see that the resolution of my virtual machine is not actually okay. So what you need to do is to install the VMware tools. So you can click install VMware tools. Probably if you have been doing this, building a lab in the past, you probably know how to do this. But if you are doing this for the first time, probably this is how you actually change the resolution of your virtual machine you just installed. So you're just going to do this once. I'm going to install it. Just install it. After installing, you can see that the virtual machine resolution is going to change. So now let me click next, and then I'm going to click the typical and then install it. So during the installation process, you're going to see that my the virtual machine resolution is going to change and then fit on the screen. So it's going to install all the required drivers and the video driver for this virtual machine to work properly. Here we go. So please, you can also do that for your second domain controller, so that you can then next will start hardening device. So you need to restart your device to complete the installation process. As an IT system administrator, one of the best practice you want to learn is how to harden your operating system. For example, you've installed a Windows Server environment. You must learn how to harden that server before you add it to be part of your domain environment. So I'm going to be listing some of the principles you will actually need to be able to harden your device. Well, the first one is you want to only install the required roles which are required for that, mostly a domain controller. You don't want to install all kind of roles on that device or features on that domain controller. And again, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your device is up to date, because we just installed this device. So you want to actually check if there are updates which are required for your Windows server or even your client operating system. Most of the time, the update is being pushed using Microsoft Intune or the Zeus, your US. So right now you can see we have some updates which are being installed on this device. Next, what you want to do is to actually disable guest account. So if I right click and then I go to computer management, under computer management here, you can see we have the local users and group. So if I go to users, you can see that the guest account is disabled. So you want to actually disable the guest account. And also for your administrator account, you want to use password. And again, you want to rename the inbuilt administrator account. If this is your first domain controller, you can do it manually. But if you are, for example, you are adding other domain, other server to become part of the domain, you can actually use group policy to rename that account. And again, of course, if you're working in the domain environment, you're going to make sure that the firewall rules are properly configured, which are going to block a lot of access to your domain controller. You want to make sure that only the required users are allowed to access your domain controller. Not all users should be able to control your domain controllers, because if everyone should have access to your domain controller, of course, they can do harm. And only the qualified engineers, for example, your IT help desk, should not be able to access your domain controller or install roles and features on your domain controller. You want to also enable Windows Defender and attack surface reduction. You want to make sure that, for example, enable the attack surface rules to make sure that the rules are being is being enabled, and also scheduled scan, if possible, weekly or even daily. That when the device probably on a specific time, there should be a kind of a scan to scan the device to see if there are any malware or any viruses on that device. And also for your auditing, you want to also make sure that you enable auditing, for example, logon events, account management, policy changes, and object accesses on your domain environment. All this can actually be done using group policy. And again, you want to make sure that the BitLocker is enabled on your OS and data drive. You want to store the recovery keys in Active Directory. And if I may advise, you want to restrict PowerShell usage, or you also need to enable the PowerShell login, that to any engineer that uses the PowerShell, the info should be logged on to see which of the engineer uses PowerShell on your domain controller. So it's actually part of your role as an IT system administrator or IT professional to learn how to properly harden your Windows server. But if we started installing our client operating system, we are going to learn also how to harden our client operating system. You can see that the the updates are still being downloaded. And please try and do this also for your second domain server. So that just try to harden the server, install all the required patches. And also, you want to also install an antivirus on your Windows server. This is actually a test environment, and I'm just doing a kind of a home lab environment. But if this is a production environment, definitely there will be a very properly licensed antivirus installed on your server, which is very, very necessary. Next, we are going to be seeing how to change the host name and configure our Windows Server IP address. And I'll be showing you which of the address range we are going to use in the next video. We are going to configure our IP address on our primary server. At this moment, this device have not been promoted to become a domain controller. As you can see, it's still part of a work group. So you want to configure a static IP address on your primary servers or on all your servers that you know your users have access to. Because if you are using a DHCP server to lease IP address to your Windows server, of course there are going to be issues, because if that server is down for a moment and your DHCP server decide to lease that same IP address to a different client operating system, there's going to be a conflict. So you want to actually reserve that IP address on your DHCP server, and also make sure that you configure your domain controller, primary, secondary, even your file server to have a static IP address. And then on your DHCP server, you want to actually block it. Make sure you reserve that IP address, that no client operating system or server should be able to use that IP address. So right now it's time to actually configure a static IP address. So you can see at this moment, you can see the IP address we have is actually being automatic, it's not static. So just click on the internet 0. There you will need to click on that internet 0, and then you can see if you click details, you can see the IP address that have been leased to this device automatically using my physical DHCP server. So it's leasing, my router is actually releasing IP address to this device. So here is the IP address range I want to use. You can see the the IP address is going to be .10.10.0.0, and as a subnet mask, the network broadcast address, and also we have the minimum and maximum IP address I can use on this class A IP address. Well, at the same time, I want to make sure that my servers have a specific range of IP address, for example, .10.10.0.10, and my secondary server .11, while my client operating system can start from .100, because I still have a lot of space. This is just a test environment, so I'm not going to be installing a lot of servers, just 2, 3, or maybe probably 3 or 4, 5 servers and client operating system. So I'll be using very few IP address, so I still have a lot of IP address to for the moment. So what we need to do right now is let's go and configure our static IP address. So here I'm going to click close and then go to properties. In properties here, you want to actually just select the TCP, the Internet Protocol version 4, TCP4, which is TCP IP version 4, and then click properties. And then we want to use the following IP address. We don't want to use obtain an IP address automatically. So enter the 10.10.0.10, and then the subnet mask, the default gateway. So the default gateway is going to be my IP, the IP address of my physical device, so that I should be able to have access to the internet. Because without me having access to the internet, I will not be able to do a lot of things, because I still want to have access to the internet from my Windows server. Should in case I want to patch my server, I want to update my Windows server, then I should be able to download the update from the internet. So please enter your default gateway if you need access to the internet. If not, you can leave it blank, and then your preferred DNS is still going to be, at this moment, you can still enter your preferred DNS server to be your default gateway address is going to be the same, so that you should have access to the internet. But after so when you click OK, that address is going to change to your loop back IP address. So let's just configure this and then click OK when it has been configured. Click OK and then click yes. You may see this error message, just click yes, click close, then close again. Here you can see I now have access to the internet. So here, if I go to details, you can see the IP address that have been configured on this device, which is static. I repeat, it has to be static. And we have our secondary server, which is going to be our secondary domain controller. So we should be able to ping, and also please configure your secondary server with the same IP address, but it's going to be .10.11 instead of .10. So you should be able to ping from your primary server to your secondary server. Sometimes the firewall is going to block it. For this training purpose, I actually disable my firewall, but you can actually create and allow ICMP for you to be able to ping your other device. You can see I have disabled my firewall. If not, I will not be able to ping my secondary server. And also for the secondary server, you should do the same. But this is just a test environment, or we can actually create a firewall rules for that. So if I just try to ping my IP address, which is my primary to server IP address, you can see I'm able to ping it. Then after which I will try to ping my ipconfig, that's my primary server address. Then if I ping my secondary server, my second server, which is .11, you can see I'm able to ping that IP address. I should be able to do the same from my secondary server, vice versa. Be able to ping if I go to the command prompt and I enter my primary server IP address, which ends in .10. So I should be able to ping that IP address without any error message. So if you're having issue, try to ping, please leave a comment in the comment section and tell me what the problem is, and I will try to help you and make sure that that problem is fixed. We are going to manually change the host name of our domain controller, which is our first Windows server. So in our second server, I'll be showing you how to change the host name using the command prompt. But to change the host name manually on our first domain controller, what we need to do is to go to local server on your server manager. And here you can see that the computer name is a standard random name given to this device during installation process. So you need to click there. And then what we need to do right now is under computer name, you need to click change. Here you can see this is actually a random name. So what we need to do is to enter the name we decided to give this device, which is the LON, which is for London. And this is a domain controller, and then 01. So into a 01. And then here, at this moment, you can see it's still a work group, but we're going to leave it like this because we're going to promote the device to become our first domain controller. Click OK. And here we need to restart our device. So I will restart this device and then come back again to confirm if the host name has been changed. So here we've restarted our device. So let's go to local server. You can see our server manager is still trying to restart. So let's go to local server. And here you can see that the host name of this computer, that's the computer name, have been changed to LONDC01. So we are going to be doing the second device, changing the host name of the second device using the command prompt, or you can also use PowerShell to do it as well. We are going to change our domain controller, that is our second domain controller host name, using the command prompt or PowerShell. You can see that the host name given to this device is actually a name given during the installation process. So it is not advisable to use this random name. So what we need to do right now is I'm going to search for PowerShell. So I'm going to start the PowerShell EC as administrator. So let me just try to do the following. I'm going to actually show the script pane. So here, I'm going to enter the following command. So if you want to use PowerShell to actually do this, you're going to enter this command. You can see we're going to change this name to, and this say is going to be our second domain controller. Well, I'm going to enter two. But if I'm going to use the command prompt, just start the command prompt as an administrator. If I'm going to use the command prompt, I'll be using this command. You can use this command. Here you can see I'm going to use the netdom rename computer at computer name. Then this is going to be our host name of our second domain controller. So you can see it says restart. So we are going to restart the device immediately, or we can still use a different command, which is called the shutdown command. So just restart our command. But for now, I'm going to actually just do the following and then hit enter. So it's going to run this command. You can see the device is being restarted automatically. So let's just hold on and see what happens if this device got started. So right now we have restarted our device. So let's go to local server. Here you can see that our device name have been changed to the right name we gave the device. So this is how you change your device name using the command prompt or PowerShell. After installing and configuring your Windows servers, so we now need to download our Windows client operating system. You know, we have the Windows 11 Professional, and also we have the Windows 11 Enterprise. Here, when I enter download Windows 11 Enterprise, you can see it's going to give me some option, but you want to download it from the official website of Microsoft. Here you can see we can actually click download, which is going to take us to download the ISO version of Windows 11 Enterprise, or we can also do the professional version. We just do Windows 11 Pro. So if I click on this link, which is the official website of Microsoft, to download Windows 11 Professional, so it's going to take me to this side whereby I can actually download the Windows ISO image. For example, I can say I want to download Windows 11. It's going to be ISO 64-bit. So what you need to do is click download. Then it's going to take you to where you're going to fill all the required info. After you fill the info and click download, it's going to take you to this page where you need to download the version you required to follow on this practice. So just click download the English version, which is the 64-bit, and after downloading it, now next we are going to actually see how to use our VMware Workstation Professional to actually install our Windows client operating system. So next we'll be seeing how to install our client operating system, and then we are also going to be updating and configuring, also hardening our Windows client operating system before we can now move on to add the device to become part of our domain environment. So let's install our Windows 11 client operating system on a virtual machine. So I'm using VMware Workstation Professional for this training purpose. So what I did is I actually create a new virtual machine, and you can see I've already created a virtual machine. When I click edit virtual machine, here you can see I'm using a 4 GB memory. The processor is 2, the hard disk I'm using 100 GB, and the CD you can see I'm using an ISO image of the Windows client operating system, which I downloaded. And for the network adapter, I'm using a NAT, which is also going to use the network address, the internet address of the physical device, and the rest is just adjust standard. So right now, if you don't know how to create a virtual machine, you can watch my previous video on Windows, how to install the Windows Server operating system. There you can see how to create a virtual machine. So let's start this virtual machine and start our installation process. So press any key to continue. So next we are going to select just language to install is going to be English, and for the time and currency, I'm going to select Belgium because I live in Belgium, and then click next, and here you can see that the keyboard is automatically selected, and we're going to install the Windows client operating system. So I'll select the I agree everything and then click next, and here you can see it says enter the product key. At this moment you will need to select I don't have the product key, which of course is going to be just an evaluation um, version you'll be using. So right now I want to install the Windows 11 Professional, and mind you, I'm going to install two Windows 11 client operating system. One is going to be for the enterprise, and this one is going to be for the professional. So let's just click next to start the installation process, and if I accept the license terms, and then we can now try to start our installation process on the disk. So here we're going to actually just select the whole disk and do next to start the install. So I'm just going to keep nothing and start the installation process. So this is going to take some few minutes, and we will come back again when the installation completes. So now you can see that we can actually continue the installation process. So this is a process which is actually standard. So I believe that if you are doing this for the first time, actually you can just click next, which of course is not that difficult. But if you have not been doing this in the past you've installed several operating systems. So please skip, you can always skip this video and then just install the virtual machine and then come back again where we are going to be updating our client operating system, changing the IP address and the host name, and also installing Active Directory domain service to our Windows server. So one thing you want to install after installing your Windows client operating system is the VMware tools. So you can see how the Windows client operating system look. At this moment, the display resolution is not optimal. So if I click display, let me just click display settings. Here you can see it says at this moment the display resolution is at 1024 times 768. So what we need to do is the following. Let me just go back to VMware and then install the VMware tools. I'm going to click install. Let me cancel this. And this is going to change the way the display resolution looks. So let me just go to DVD and then double click on setup to start the installation process. So next, we would just want to click next and then select typical, click next and then install. So during the install process, you can see it's going to install all the required VMware tools for this client operating system. And then you can see it's starting some specific service, installing the specific driver, and also the video driver is being installed. And then our resolution is going to automatically change. Then after the installation complete, we need to restart our device. So let's just wait for some seconds for this to complete, and then you can see it's trying to change. So let's just wait also. Here we go. Here you can see that our installation just got changed. So right now we need to restart the device after the installation complete, and then we can. So now restart your device. I'm going to click finish. It says restart. So restart your device, and then next we are going to update and configure our operating system. So we're going to try to harden our system before we even add it to the domain. So we need to update it with the right drivers, the right update. And mind you, if you are working in a domain environment where your device is added to the domain environment, and for example, you are using a Visual server or you are using a configuration manager or Microsoft Intune, definitely all the required updates will be pushed to your client operating system. After restarting your device, what you want to do next is update your device. So it is very important that during this training process, before you join your device, to even change your device name, that's the host name of your client operating system, try to update your device and make sure that your device have the latest update. So right now, because for example, if you download a client operating system from the internet, for example, you downloaded it 2 months ago. So in that 2 months space, there would have been some recent update pushed by Microsoft. So if I go to my set menu and then just enter update, here you can see we have check for update. So when we say check for update, you can see we already have some updates that are available for us to download and install. So what I want to do right now is just to hit the download and install. So it's going to try to download all this available updates. You can see we have the Microsoft Defender antivirus, security updates, malicious software removal, cumulative updates, and the Windows security platform. Make sure you have access to the internet, because if not, you will not be able to download the update. So after downloading the update, if there are any required restart of your device, you'll be requested to restart your device. So now we are going to just download. So try to download the update, restart your device if required. Next, we're going to learn how to change our client operating system hostname and then configure our IP address so that we should be able to communicate with our Windows server. So right now, we are going to change the hostname of our client operating system. We have installed our client operating system. We have updated our device. So it's time to change the hostname. So when you install your client operating system, you are being asked to give the device a name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start PowerShell IC as administrator. So let me run this as administrator. I'm going to say yes. Let's just wait for the PowerShell to start. But mind you, if you're working in an enterprise environment, definitely you will not be doing this manually. The host name actually is going to be configured during the automation of the installation process. If, for example, I enter host name, you can see the host name of this device is called Kelvin. But if I enter the following command, PowerShell. Here I'm going to use this command, the rename computer. This is the new name. It's going to be C001. I'm going to restart my device. So if I just hit this command, you can see it's going to restart it automatically because I didn't put any time frame for the device to get started. So this is going to start automatically. And then when we restart our device, we can now confirm the new host name of our device. So let's log on to our device. Log on. So if we've logged onto our device, so I'm going to actually try to start the command prompt. Let me just start CMD and then try to check what the new host name is. If I enter host name, you can see our device host name has been changed to C001. So we are going to actually also try to change the IP address of this device, because if I enter IP config, you can see we have a different IP address. So now, right now, I want to change the IP address so that we should be able to communicate to our Windows server. So right now, we are going to change the IP address of our client operating system so that our client operating system should be able to communicate with our server. So because they should be in the same IP address range. First of all, if I enter IP config, you can see the IP address of this device, which of course is using part of the IP address of the physical device which grants this device access to the internet. But if I go to my client operating system, to my server, and I go to the command, let me just start the command prompt, and I enter IP config. Here you can see we have the 10.10.0.10, and it's using the default gateway to access the internet. So if I try to, from here, and I try to ping, let's see, 10.10.0.10. Oh, I think I made a mistake there somewhere. Let me just on this 10.10.0.10. You can see it can't access that device because they are not in the same IP address range. So let me just close that and then start the control panel. And then if I start the control panel and I go to my network and sharing, and I go to the internet, here we can see the details of the IP address. But I want to change this to become static so that I should be able to communicate with my server and at the same time have access to the internet. So I'm going to use the IP address range of 10.10.0.100. For my client operating system, I'm using 100, and for my server, I'm using 10 dot, for example, from 10, 11, 12, 13. So to differentiate between my client and my server. And here I'll be using the 255.255. And the default gateway is going to be 192.168. Then 13.2. So right now I want to use my preferred DNS server is going to be the IP address of my server, of my domain server, which the device I'll be using for my domain server, so that this device will be able to, I'll be able to join this device to my domain server. And then I'm going to use the alternative DNS. I'm going to put the IP address of my default gateway as well, so that I should be able to have access to the internet. Or I put 13, it should be 13, and then 13. Yes, and here should be 2. So I'm going to say enter for that. I'm going to say yes, okay. And then you can see it says no network access, and then after some time it's going to change to have access to the internet. You can see we have access to the internet. So when I click close and I try to ping the server again, here we go. Right now, you can see we now have access from the server. So we can now access the server from our client operating system. And also, we should be able to access the client. If I do ping 10.10, oh, 10.0.100, I should be able to ping the client operating system from my server as well. Well, all these I'm doing them manually. If you are working in an enterprise environment, definitely you'll be using a DHCP server. So I will try to see if we can actually configure a DHCP server in our second domain controller or using a different server entirely, where I'll be releasing IP address to my client operating system automatically from my DHCP server, so that I shouldn't do it manually. Next, we are going to see how to install Active Directory, in domain service, and also we'll be seeing how to configure DNS and also how to configure reverse lookup zone and forward lookup zone. It's time to promote our primary server to become our first domain controller. So this is going to be our first primary domain controller. To promote this server to become a domain controller, we need to install the Active Directory domain service role. So what is the ADDS? Active Directory Domain Service is a Microsoft Windows Server service that provides centralized identity, authentication, authorization, and management for users, computers, and other resources in a network. In simple terms, ADDS lets an organization manage who can log in, what they can access, and how computers are configured, all from one central system. So to configure your ADDS, what you need to do first, you want to make sure you've configured a static IP address, which is actually a must. And also, you want to make sure that the host name is properly configured, because if you don't configure the proper host name, you may not be able to change it, which may cause issues on your device. So just click the Add Roles and Features and then click Next. So next, we want to select the role-based features and then also want to click Next. Here we're going to select a server from the server pool. But if we have, for example, we have different servers, you can actually select one of the server, because you may have different server than what we have here. So you just select the right server and then click Next. So we're going to select the Active Directory domain service role and then click Include all the features. And then this is also going to be our DNS server. So I'm just going to select the DNS DNS server, because this is going to be our primary DNS server, and then select it and then click Next. Here we're just going to click Next. And you can see some other extra features which will be installed alongside our Active Directory domain service and DNS. So all this will be included. Then click Next and then click Next. Install. So, but mind you, this is actually the first part. The second part is we're going to actually promote it. First is to install, and then we need to promote the server to become domain controller. You can see it's actually installing. So let's just wait for this to complete. Then we can promote the server. Here we go. You can see that the installation just gets completed. So just click. You can also see that we have the option to actually promote this server to become a domain controller. So just click on it, promote the server to become a domain controller. And so this is going to be our first option. So select the first choice, and then you will need to actually make sure that you already have a name you want to use. Because if you don't have a name you want to use, there may be a conflict with, if for example, if that name is already in existence. Well, you can see we also have other options. For example, we can add this to a domain that is already existing, or we can add a new forest. But we want to actually add a new forest because this is our primary domain controller. So enter your domain name. It may be actually be different from what I'm entering. And then you can choose .com, .be, depends on where you are living. So for me, I'm choosing a .com. And you can see that this is also going to be our global catalog, and also it's going to be our primary domain and our primary DNS server. So enter a password, and please make sure that you remember this password because you may need it in the future. Just enter the password. And the error message, the warning message you are seeing, that is the standard warning message you receive. So let's just click next, and then we can now promote. It's going to check if we meet all the prerequisites. Well, first of all, you will need to click next here. So here we have our different log file and our database file. Well, if you are working in the enterprise environment, this location may be different than what you are seeing here. So some companies do save it in a network location, but for now, we're going to save it in this location. Click next, and here you can see all the info. You can also click view script. To see the script, you can use this script to install a different server entirely. So let's just click next. And then it's going to actually show us a prerequisite to see if we meet all the requirements. If not, it's going to display an error message, which we can't, and then we cannot proceed. But at this moment, we have a green check. So we just need to click install, and then installation process will start. So this is going to take some time. Depends on how fast your device is. If you are using, like, for example, I think I'm using about 4 GB of memory, so it's going to actually be fast. Then your device is going to restart during the installation process. So just continue. Don't put off your device. Just wait for this to complete, and then we can proceed from there. You can see my device is about to be signed out, and then I'll be re-signed in again. So there we go. So my device is shutting down and restarting. So now you can see I've been logged on, and now we've promoted our device, and you can see I'm logging in as Kelv Global, not locally anymore. So here I don't have an account yet. So if I choose other users, I'm going to log in locally. So enter your password. You entered you used to log in as doing when you created the Windows operating system for the first time, and then it's going to log you in. Here we go. And also you want to make sure that, because I'm using a VMware workstation, that's why you can see that the resolution look like this. Please install your VMware tools if you are required to do so, and then you can see that the VMware is now looking well. The resolution have just changed because of the VMware tools we installed. So you can see right now that this device has been promoted. You can see the domain server, and also if I go to tools, you can see we have some extra tools which have just been installed, like for example the Active Directory users and computers, and some other tools, the domain trust. We have our group policy management also, which have been installed, and some other tools which have been installed can use to manage our device. So if I go back to tools again and I click Active Directory users and computers, here we go. You can see we have the Active Directory users and computers. You can see all the different organizational units. So right now I want to create a new organizational unit. I'm just going to call this, you can just call this Kelv Global or a different name, if it depends on what name you want to create. So what's here, you can then create different organizational units, for example, your users, your computers, your security groups. So I'm going to create a different organizational unit again. You're going to create all the different organizational units you required. Here we go. You see, I've created one. I can create a second one, for example, for your computers. So you create all the different organizational units you need for this to function. But at the same time, we're going to see how to create the organizational unit using PowerShell scripts. So you can see we'll call nesting. For example, I've created organizational unit, and now I'm trying to create a user. This user is going to be myself, and I'm going to be the global admin for this domain environment. So go ahead and create a user account. And mind you, when you create a user account, make sure you go with a standard name. For example, we just have one global name at this moment. And again, if you are creating a user's name, some people can use the first initial and then the last name, or they can use both the first name dot the last name. So that's going to be your standard when you are creating the user's name. So here you can see say password never expired, which of course it is not allowed if you are working in an enterprise environment. I'm doing this because this is just a test environment. You can see then I'm going to add all. I've become an enterprise administrator, domain administrator, and also, for example, I can also say I want to be the schema admin for this environment. I'm doing this because this is just a test environment. If you're working in an enterprise environment, definitely
all different users will have different roles. You may not be the global and the domain administrator for that company. Someone else may be doing it. You may just be a standard user who have elevated rights to be able to create users accounts. So you'll be given a specific role just to create users account. And again, I can also use a copy to actually create new users. Then the user will have the exact copy of my user account.
We are going to be discussing about DNS. So what is actually a DNS? A DNS works like a phone book. It helps computers find each other by name or by IP address. So if I go to my Windows server, which we just promoted to become a domain controller, and I go to tools, here you can see we have DNS. And in DNS, we have different DNS zone. But we have the two main types of DNS zone, which is the forward lookup zone, and you can see we also have the reverse lookup zone. What does the forward lookup zone does? The forward lookup zone actually resolve host name to IP address. So if, for example, you type a host name, let me go to my command prompt. Let me just go to my command prompt. Then I click the command prompt. So if I, for example, we tap the host name, which is, let me just do pingkelvglobal.com. It's going to actually resolve it to pinging Kelv Global. It's going to resolve it to our IP address. Here you can see we already have the forward lookup zone. You can see it has some zones already which has been created. You can see we have some zones. For example, we can also create some extra um, DNS here. But we also have the reverse lookup zone. What does the reverse lookup zone does? The reverse lookup zone actually resolve IP address to host name. So for example, when you type in your IP address, it's going to resolve it to your domain host name. At this moment, we don't have any IP address. So what we want to do is the following. We're going to right click and then click new zone. We're going to click next. Here you can see we're going to make it, this is going to be our primary zone because this is our first domain controller, so we're going to make it our primary zone. So our secondary domain controller, we can make it our secondary zone, which means a copy of our primary zone will actually be stored in the secondary zone. So we're going to store all the zone in Active Directory available if only if DNS server is a writable domain controller, which it does. Here it says to all DNS servers running on a domain controller in this domain kelvglobal.com, or to all DNS server running the domain controller in this forest. But we're going to use in this domain. I'm going to select next. It's going to be IP4 version 4 reverse lookup zone. So we also have the version 6. I'm going to say next. So I'm going to say to identify the reverse lookup zone, type the network ID. So the network ID for this is going to be 10. Oh, just 10. 10.10.0. That is actually our network ID. You can see it's actually a reverse 10.10.0. And then I'm going to click next. Allow only secure dynamic update. Very important, recommended for Active Directory. You can allow both non-secure and secure dynamic update. But we want to only allow secure dynamic update. I'm going to click next and then finish. So if I click finish, you can see we just have a reverse lookup zone created. And here you can see we have two records which have been created. So you can see we have start of authority and the name server. So I can double click on it. You can see we have the serial number. If I go to the name server, here you can see it's actually resolving to our domain controller. Later, we're going to have our second domain controller. So here, for we go start of the authority, you can see our primary server, responsible person as the host master, it says. So it's going to be refreshing every 15 minutes, retry interval every 10 minutes, and expires after 1 day. And then the zone transfer. At this moment, we don't have zone transfer. We can also say allow zone transfer to any server or only to the following server. If only when we have our secondary domain controller, then we are going to actually create this allow this zone transfer to only to the following server. For example, we can select and then check for a second server. So I'm just going to cancel that for now. And this as well, we can see we also have our name server, server of authority. And also, if I go to general, you can see we have it says running. We can pause it. Active Directory integrated, we can change it to all DNS server in this domain. We can also change that as well. So I'm just going to cancel that. So what we're going to be doing is in the process of this training, we're also going to be creating other DNS record. For example, we have some like the CNAME, the MS record, and some AA record. If I go to my Kelv Global here, you can see we have different records we are going to be creating in the process of this training. So next, we are going to be deploying an additional domain controller to a domain, which means that we are going to actually be promoting our secondary domain controller. So we're going to see how to promote our secondary domain controller, and then we're going to add our Windows client to our domain controller, and then we can see how it replicates between both server. So let's see how we actually deploy an additional domain controller or promote our secondary domain controller to be our backup domain controller. At this moment, we are going to be deploying our secondary domain controller. So we've already installed our primary domain controller. You can see that's the LONDC01. You can see it belongs to this part of this domain, kelvglobal.com. And right now we want to install our DC02, which is going to be our secondary domain controller. So what you need to do is, so you're going to add the roles and future, and then we're going to click next, select next, and then I'm going to also select next from the server pool. And here we want to select Active Directory Domain Service, and also want to also select DNS because this is also going to be our secondary DNS server. So we're just going to click next and then next for now, and next and then install. So just like the way we did for our primary domain controller, so I'm going to come back again when this installation is complete. By then, we are going to promote our server to become part of our domain. So right now, we are going to promote this server to be a domain controller. So what you need to do is to click the promote this server to a domain controller. And then here we're going to say add a domain controller to an existing domain. So what you want to do is the following. You can actually enter the domain name here, but what I would do is I'm going to click change. And here I'm going to enter kelvin.johnson at kelvglobal.com, and then enter your password and then hit OK. So you can see automatically the domain is being selected, and now we are going to click next. So by clicking next, you can see this is going to be it's also going to be our DNS server. It's also going to be working as our global catalog, which is going to be our secondary global catalog. But we can also make this a read-only domain controller, which of course we don't want to do that right now. So I'm going to enter the password and then enter the password again. And here we're going to say next, then click next. It says it's going to replicate from any domain controller, or we can actually select the LONDC01, which is our first domain controller. So when you have different domain, for example, some companies have like multiple domain controllers, you can always select this any domain controller. But I'm going to select this domain because that is the only domain we have. So I'm going to click next. And here you can see our database folder, log file folder. This can also be placed in a different network share, but I'm going to leave it here the way it is for this training purpose. So let's just click next, and we can also view the script, which can also be used for a new deployment. So I'm going to click next to check if everything is okay, and then we can now click install. So by clicking install, this is going to take some minutes. So please let's just go and grab a coffee and then come back again to see if our installation was complete. Here you can see that our device is getting restarted. So it's going to restart then for us to log in again as a member of the domain Kelv Global domain. Okay, let's try to log in. I'm going to just try to log in. Here you can see I'm logging onto this device as a member of the Kelv global domain and enter your right password, and let's go and see Active Directory users and computers. If there are any replication, which of course there should be a replication between your server and the domain controller, because everything is going to be replicated. It's going to be exact copy of our primary domain controller. Here we go. So if I go to tools, and here you can see we also have Active Directory where our users have computers. We have our DNS. So let's start with Active Directory users and computers. So there we should see our users we created in our primary domain controller. So if I go to here you can see we have our Kelv Global, we have the organizational unit, you can see we have our Kelvin. If I go back again here, you can see we also have the exact copy of what we did. You can see our computers. And also, if I go back here also, you should be able to see our domain controllers. And also, if I should go to my DNS, let's go and see our DNS. Here we have our forward lookup zone. And here you can see we have our second server that have just been added. And also, we should also have the the name server. You can see we have our second server. So if I go to my domain controller and let me close this and go to the DNS from the primary server, here we have the same. So we have our first server. We should also, let me just do a reload. So it's going to take some time. We also need to make sure that we are getting all the required info from the other server as well. So because at this moment, we are not seeing the second server, which is not available, but we are seeing it. If you go here, you can see we are seeing our first and second, and also we are not seeing all the required information. Let me see, we have it there. So let me just go to properties and see name server. Okay, here we can see our name server. You can see our secondary server as well. The zone transfer, it says allow. Let me see. Can I say allow to any server? Let me just click OK and then go back again to our server here and then do some refresh to see if we're going to get it exactly. Here we go. You can see right now it just appeared. And also here I'm going to do reload, do yes, to do some refresh. So this is going to take some time actually for it to appear here. And definitely we're going to see our server there, just the way we see for this Antwerpen DC02. So this is how you promote your server to become part of a domain of an existing domain controller. And next, we are going to be seeing how to actually we're going to be creating users and group. And first of all, we're going to be adding our client to be part of our domain controller. And then we are going to be also creating groups and organizational units and also managing Active Directory users and computers. It is time to join our Windows client operating system, which is Windows 11, to become part of our domain environment. And our domain server is a Windows Server 2025. So if I go to my local server here, you can see we have this domain kelvglobal.com, and that is our computer name. And you can see the IP address of this server. So if I go to my client operating system, which is a Windows 11 device, and I go to the command prompt, here, if I enter ipconfig, you can see the IP address is actually in the same range as my domain server. So if I go to my domain server, you can see that the IP address, which is end with 10.10, so I should be able to ping my server 0.10. Here we go. So what I want to do right now is I want to actually join this device to become part of our server. So what you need to do is to go to, let me just close this to show you from the beginning. So if I go to my start menu and I go to settings, here from settings here, you will need to actually go to system. And in system, we have the option, when I scroll down, here we have under, let me just go to about, and here you can see we have our domain or work group. So if I go to the domain or work group, you can see we have the option called computer name on our system properties. And here you can see my device name is computer 001 and it's a work group. So if you're working in a domain environment, in an enterprise environment for a small or big company, all this process is going to happen automatically. You don't need to do this manually. It is during the installation process when your device is connected to the network. For example, you may be using Microsoft Intune Configuration Manager. Automatically, your device will be joined to a domain server. So, but right now, let me just click change name. So I'm going to actually leave the host name the way it is, but I want to actually join this device to be part of the following kevglobal.com and then click OK. So if everything goes well, you can see we are going to receive the option to actually enter a user name. So I'm going to do the following. I'm going to enter administrator at kelvglobal.com and then enter the password of that account that have a domain. They said that is a domain administrator on your domain server. Just enter a password and then click OK. So if everything goes well, you can see that goes very fast because there is no error message. So click OK and then click OK. So if I go to my DC, if I go to Active, okay, I have Active Directory open here. At this moment, you can see we don't have anything in computers. Right now, when I refresh, you can see the device has just been added C001. So what I need to do right now is, let me close this, and I can click OK. So it says we need to restart my device. So just restart now for you to be able to log on to this device as a domain administrator. But mind you, I have a user, I think I've created a user account here. We are going to see how to create users accounts manually and how to use PowerShell and even the command prompt to create a specific user account. Here we have the account of Kelvin Johnson. So if I go back again, let's just wait for this. So now I can now decide to go to other accounts and then you can see I'm logging on to this device as Kelv Global. So I can use this account, Johnson, and then enter my password. So I'm going to do this for the first time. So this is going to take some few seconds and then I'll be able to log in. This is how you join your device from a client operating system to become part of our domain server. Next, we are going to be seeing how to create and manage Active Directory groups and organizational units. And also we'll be seeing how to create Active Directory users and even how to create computer objects in Active Directory before we actually join that device to become part of our domain environment. We are going to learn how to create organizational units in Windows Server 2025. So here in Active Directory users and computers, you can see I have my domain name. But how do you start the Active Directory users and computers? So you can go to your server manager and from there you can click on tools and here we go. We have the ADUC. And if I go to my start menu and I just type active, and here you can see we have different active, then we just search for Active Directory users and computers. So what I need to do right now, you can see we have different organizational units which has been created by default. And this one I created it manually. So to create an organizational unit, for example, I want to create all my organizational units here in Kelv Global I created. So I'm going to create a sub organizational unit, for example. You can just go and then click organizational unit, enter a name, and you can see it says protect container from accidental deletion, which means that you should not be able to delete it. If I decide to click delete right now, I'm going to receive an error message which says you do not have sufficient privilege, which means because it was actually protected. So I want to use a PowerShell script to create multiple organizational units. Well, we can actually use a standard PowerShell script which is very simple, or we can actually use a CSV file. So I'll be doing that if I want to create groups. I'll be showing you how to use a CSV file to create multiple groups using a CSV file in combination with PowerShell. But here right now, we can see we have, first of all, we need to run the import module Active Directory. So what does this do? It loads the Active Directory PowerShell module into your current PowerShell, which then you can decide you can start using all the Active Directory command. So we can actually just run or just this command You can see I click run, but it has already been run on this Windows Server 2025, so nothing happens. But right now, you can see we have all our organizational units. That's the organizational unit you want to create. So first of all, you can see I have computers, users, HR, and others. So you can add as much as you want here. And then we're going to say, well, we want to actually place them all in this location. So how do you get this? So what I did is the following. If I go to properties, under properties, if I go to attributes, and you can see here, if I click view, you can see this is the location of this organizational unit. So let me just see. And that is it. I'm going to click cancel and then cancel. So I want to place it there. I want to use the for loop. So we're going to say for each of these organizational units in all my use, I'm going to say we're going to use the command, Active Directory command, new Active Directory organizational unit. That's the right command to use. And the name is going to be OU. That is this. These are all the names that we created. And the path is going to be, this is the name of the path. This is the location. Protect from accidental deletion, which is going to be true. Or we can say false, which means I should be able to delete all these organizational units without any problem. So let's try the command and see what happens. So I'm going to actually, let me just cancel this for now and then run all the command at the same time. Here we go. If I go now to my Active Directory users and computers, you can see nothing happens. If I do a refresh, here we go. You can see our organizational unit has been created. But if, for example, I want to create, for example, I want to say, okay, well, I want to create in users, I want to create different organizational unit as well. So I'm going to do the following. I'm just going to go to properties, and here we have the attributes. I'm going to say view, then select this, then go back again to my PowerShell script, and then I'm going to use the same location. But right now, I want to just change all this. For example, I want to say this is going to be admins, and then here I'm going to leave this for users. I'm going to say call this one. Let me just call this Helpdesk. I'm going to say this one is going to be this is going to be IT users, Helpdesk users. This is going to be network. And also I can say, well, I want to, these are sales users, these are marketing users. Then I want to create a different organizational unit inside these users. So what you're going to do is is the following. Let me clear my screen. And then I think this is slow. Then run this command again. Here we go. You can see the command has just been run. So if I go to my users and I do a refresh, here we go. You can see all the different users have just been created. So right now, I can decide to go. I have a user I've created before here in the past. Then I can just move this to admin. Then he's going to be admin users. So next, we are going to see how to create groups using the CSV file with the PowerShell command. So next, we're going to see how to create groups. We are going to start creating groups in our Active Directory. So we've already created our organizational unit. You can see we've created different organizational units. So if you don't know how to create organizational unit, you can create it manually or you can use PowerShell script. So you can see that in our previous video. But right now we want to create groups. So what we are going to do is the following. We are going to create different groups. You can see in our organizational unit, we can actually create groups in this unit. For example, I can create a group in computers, in finance, in help desk. We are going to be using a .csv file. So if I go to File Explorer, and here you can see I have a group .csv which I created. I'm going to open this with Notepad. So if you have Office installed on your device, you can use Excel to open .csv file, but if you don't have it, you can always use Notepad. Here you can see the following that has been created. We have a name, we have the account name, the SAM account name, we have the scope, we have the category, and we have the organizational unit where the group will be placed. And you can see the group name, we have the SAM account name, the global is going to be scope, is going to be global. We also have global universal, we have security, and we have distribution list, which will be used for mail group. And then we have a PowerShell simple PowerShell script which we are going to use. So we have a group name. So we're going to import use the dot use the import CSV command. So we're going to be importing it from this location. And then we're going to be saying that for each, we're going to use the for loop, groups, group in groups. And then we're going to do the new add command. And then here you can see the name, which is actually correspond to this name, same account. We have the scope, and category and so you can see that all the names, some account, group scope, group category, part are all dots. You can see we are linking it back again to all the following. So right now, let's try and see if it's going to work. So you just need to run this command, and here we go. You can see I didn't receive any error message, which means everything goes as planned. Now let's try to see in which group did we created it. We create HR users. So let me go to HR and see. We already have it there. I think we also have in IT. We also have the IT admins. We also have sales. I think we also have let's see, the IT help desk. Let me do a refresh. Oh, here we go. We have the IT help desk. So you can actually do a refresh here. Then, if we can see, we have on the help desk HR IT. Don't have marketing. So here we can also create, we have the IT admins, we can also create a security group. For example, we can say it's going to be a global security. I can actually call this, let me just call this marketing group. So I can just call this marketing group, and here we go. We have the marketing group. So right now, if I go to IT, here we have the IT admin, and you can see the member at this moment, the member is empty. So I can add, for example, I can say I want to add my name to that group and then just hit OK. So now I'm a member of this group. So it is actually a best practice. For example, if you want to grant access to a user, it is not actually it's not a best practice to grant access to a specific user. So it is best practice to grant access to a security group. Do you know why? Because if you grant access to a group and you want to actually remove that user from that group, it's actually very, very easy. So you just need to remove that user from this group. Because if you are going to add a user to it, just add, for example, grant access to a specific user, and you are doing it for each user. So you now start searching for that user and then going to remove that user from that group. Of course, so which means, but creating a group is more easier than if you want to grant access to a user, you just use that group you created, and then you can add multiple users to that group. And again, there are PowerShell script which you can also use to add users, multiple users to a specific group. If you have more than one user, if you just one, you can do it manually. But if you have more than one users, you can always do add these users to this group. So what we're going to be doing next is create users. We're going to be seeing how to create users manually and also how to use PowerShell script to create multiple users at the same time and add them to the various different um, organizational unit we've created. And also you can also add users to group automatically using PowerShell script. We are going to be creating users account in Active Directory users and computers. So you can see we have created different organizational units, and here in users in admin, you can see we have the account which was created manually, which is called Kelvin Johnson, and he's a member of the domain admin. But I want to create multiple users account using PowerShell script. So what you need to do first is to create a .csv file. So you can see the first name, last name, user's name, password, and OU. So if I double click, you can see I'm going to use the first name, the last name, and then we have the account, the user's logon name, and it's going to be at kelglobal.com, and that is the address. And you can also add multiple variables to your script, but for right now, we're going to do it very simple. And this is the script we are going to be using. So let me just change this to capital letter for this purpose training, because the one I created manually was in capital letter. So here you can see we're going to be using this location. The file is in this location. This is the name we're going to be using is the variable name, and we're going to use we will be using the import CSV command. And for the for each loop, you'll be using this a lot if you are working with PowerShell scripts in Active Directory users and computers. So we're going to do the for each loop using the command user in users, that's the users. And then we're going to say the password is going to be secure. We're going to convert that to string users.password. And then we're going to use the new Active Directory users command. Then these are all the different variable, which of course should correspond to what you have here. Right now, you can see my user's name, Thomas, Rock, and this is the first name and the last name. And then we have the user's name, Thomas.rock, the password, and the location where the account will be stored. So we have, for example, the help desk, we have the sales department, IT department, and it all correspond to these various location. So let's run this command and see what happens. So we're going to run that. We didn't receive any error message. So I'm going to just go to my users and then do a refresh. And then if I go to admin, you can see, oh, help desk, 3 account has been created. IT, we have Tinike. Marketing, we have Cliff and Rudy. Also, we also have different accounts that has been created. So if I go to my account, you can see that the kelvglobal.com, and also if I go to general, you can see we have just simple information. The display name is not added, description, office. So we are still missing a lot of information. For example, the email, if you are working for a big organization, definitely the email will be added. This is going to be added to the script as well, because then you have an Exchange server or Exchange online server which is linked to your domain, and of course every single user should have a an email account and mostly a telephone number, office location, description of the office, and the user's display name. So this is actually a simple method to create a user account using PowerShell, but there are more advanced methods, which of course is going to be a loop. We'll be creating like thousands of users accounts to the different departments. But for now, mind you, if you are migrating Active Directory, you'll be doing that. But if you started working, the user's account will be created manually, but probably maybe with just one. When the user joins the department, you're going to be using like a copy of this account to create a new account, because you say, okay, this user belongs to the sales department. So everything is going to be a copy of this user account, and the user will be directly assigned to this organizational unit. So next, we are going to be learning about group policy, how to create manage group policies, how to install software using group policies, and how to enable remote desktop using group policies, and lots more. Now it's time to create and manage group policy objects in our Windows server. So if you want to manage group policy, what you need to do is from your server manager, you can go to tools and start group policy management. But we can also do it from our start menu, just enter group, and then it's going to actually set for group policy management. Then you can just click on it. So what is a group policy in a domain environment? A group policy is a feature in Active Directory that lets you administrators centrally control user settings, computer settings, security policies, software deployment, and script. For example, we are going to be seeing how to deploy software using group policies. And also, why do you actually need group policy in a domain environment? First of all, you need group policy to enforce security, to keep the system consistent, to save time, and also to meet compliance rules. So let's say, for example, you want to deploy a policy to like 1,000 devices. The best way to do it is to use group policy management, so that when that device log on, when a user log on to that device, the policy will apply either to the computer or to the user's profile. So right now, let's say we want to create a policy that prevents users from logging off their device. What we need to do is the following. We need to go to under our group policy management. Here you can see we have different organizational units. And this organizational unit actually sync with, if I go to Active Directory users and computers, here you can see we have our organizational unit, and every single organizational unit we have created will also be in the group policy management. So here, if I go to users, you can see we have a lot of organizational units under users. So I want to create a policy and I will call it prevent log off. So I'm going to say okay. And here you can see when I create the policy, it's also going to be available here under prevent logoff. So when I delete this policy I just created, it should still be available under the group policy object. So right click and then click edit. Here, if I click edit, you can see we have the user's profiles and the user's configuration and the computer configuration. So this applies to the computer and this applies to the user's profile. So here we have, you can see we have our policies. Just click on that. And also we also have our administrative template. For example, I says I want to create a policy under the start menu to actually prevent users from logging on to their device. So I'm going to go look for, let's say, remove. For example, we have remove log off on the start menu. So I can just double click, click enabled, and here just created by Kelvin Johnson. So I love doing this because it's allowed the next engineer or someone who tried to modify this policy that I'm the one that created the policy. So you can see the policy has been enabled, but right now the policy is not effective because I just enabled this policy. So what we need to do right now is the following. So if I go here, if I go back again to, let me see, okay, here we have our policy has been created. Let me just go back again to our policy. And here, when we create OK, and I go to settings, trying to generate reports, and under the settings, I can go to start menu. You can see the policy that have just been created. It's going to remove log off on the start menu. So let's try it and see. If I go to my C001, at this moment, if I go to my start menu, sorry, if I right click, and here you can see we have sign out or sleep shutdown. So right now the log off is going to be removed. Let's try, and if I here you can see we have sleep. I can't shut it. I can shut it down. But here the sign out, that's the sign out, which is the log off, is going to be removed. So let's do the following. Let me just go to the command prompt and then start the command. I'm going to do gp update, which is group policy update, and I'm going to force it. Force the policy I just applied. You can see it says updating policy. Let's just wait for the policies to be applied and then we can see the effect. Here we go. You can see it says computer policy update has completed successfully. So if I right click and I go, you can see I don't have the option to actually sign out from this device, which is also log off. I can only go to sleep, shut down, or restart. But we can also do the same thing. We can also prevent shutdown from this device and only allow log off. So let's say, for example, we want to remove the shutdown from this device or even the restart and sleep. So let me go back again to our device. Here, you can see we just enabled the policy log off. I'm going to not configured, click applied. I can also remove what I just set. And then here I want to actually remove and prevent the shutdown from this device. Let's look for that. Here we go. We have the remove and prevent access to the shutdown, restart, sleep, and hibernate command. So I'm going to click on that and click enabled. Click apply and click OK. So if I go to my C001, at this moment, I can still actually shut down my device. So let's try to enforce the policy again. And then when I go to my right click again my device, here you can see I can only sign out from this device. I can't shut it down. So that is why if you're working as an IT system administrator, you can see this policy is actually applied to a lot of servers, which means that you can actually log off from that device, but you can't shut it down because when you are working with a server, when you shut that server down, because there are going to be a lot of issues because a lot of users cannot access their resources anymore. So, and again, when you shut down the device, shut down that server, a lot of things will stop working. So, with this policy, you can actually prevent the users from shutting down that device. Let me just decide to let me enable that again, and then click enable it. And also, you can see we have a lot of policies that can be configured, and Also, if I go to like desktop, you can see we have a lot. So I will advise you to actually just check. If you are working in a training environment like this, you can't do anything wrong. So just try your possible best to play with it, see how it works, and see how you can actually just try to implement a lot of policies and see how these policies works. Because please always try to prevent you from doing it on a Windows server that you are working on. Always try to make sure that it only applies to the client operating system. Because if I decide to reinforce my policy, then we will now have the option to shut to you can see we now have the option to actually shut down this device, restart the device. So by doing a GP update, it actually enforces the policy. But if you don't do that, it takes about 90 minutes for that policy to be applied. And also, when you restart the device and the device is trying to log on to the domain environment, of course, the policy will also be applied and take effective from that moment. So please try your possible best to make sure that you always try to practice yourself, implement these policies, and see how it works. So next, we are going to be seeing how to deploy software using this policy, using group policy. So we have seen how to create and manage group policy objects. Right now, let's see how to install software using group policy. So let's say we have a software called the Notepad plus plus we want to install. You have your standard Notepad, and we also have the Notepad plus plus, which is mainly used by programmers and some advanced IT users. So let's say you want to deploy Notepad plus plus to all your users using group policy management. So right now you can see we have our organizational unit, and also we have on our computers, we have a device in LON, which is London. So if I go to Active Directory users and computers, here we have our computers and I have LON. You can see we have one device there. So what I need to do right now is to right click and then create a GPO and link it there. I'm going to call this, let me just call this Notepad plus plus and then click OK. So I want to right click and then click edit. So I want to actually deploy the software under the computer configuration, which means that it's going to be applied to that device. I'm going to go to software settings under software installation. So here I'm going to right click and then click new and then packages. You can click packages. And first of all, you want to actually browse to that location. You can see it's actually, first of all, let me go to File Explorer and then this page C, local disk. Here we have a software folder. If I right click and then click properties, you can see that this folder is being shared. So the folder must be shared and also must be accessible by all users. So you want to actually make sure that under the share, oh, sorry, if I go to advanced sharing and under permission, you can see I make authenticated users should have, for example, read access. So here I just grant them full access, but they should have read access. So I'm going to cancel that. And also under security, authenticated users or the your domain users should have read access. So you can browse to the location. You can see we browse to the location and then just select the software. So we have two options, assign or advanced. So when you click assign, it will be available directly. When you click advanced, you have more options. So if I click assign, you can see we have the software here. So you can see that's a 64-bit.msi. Then I can right click and then click properties. You can see then we have the name. We can change the name. The deployment is assigned. We can uninstall the application when it falls out of the scope of management. We can also upgrade this application. We can add and upgrade. So here we have category and also we have security. So I'm going to just click apply and then apply. So right now, this software is going to be available to users on their device. And mind you, don't forget that we created this policy under London. So let me go back again to my GPO. Here you can see we have policies we just created. So, and then if I go to assigned application notepad plus plus deployment, you can see the software will be deployed. So if I go back again to my C001, so the first thing you want to make sure you have is the following. If I just enter the following, let me try to see if I have access to that location, which I should do. If not, I would not be able to install the software. Here I have access to that location. So I'm going to enter my GPO update first. But mind you, the policy to deploy software may take some time. At this moment, we don't have Notepad. You can see we only have Notepad, but the Notepad++ is not available. You can see the difference of what happened. When I apply the policy for the users, the policy we created to actually prevent users to shut down this device, we were not requested to restart our device. But right now, we have been asked to restart our device. So, which means when I say yes and I hit enter, so my device will be restarted in less than a minute. And again, during the restart process, that is when the software will be installed. So let's restart our device and see how that goes. So we are going to log on to our device. And when you log onto your device, sometimes there may be some delay process because your device you need to log on. Then the policy we need to check if you have the right to actually install that software on that device. And then if you want to actually monitor your installation process, or you need to go to thing. You need to go to your task manager, and under your task manager, you should see that the software is being installed. Let's just wait for some minutes for the software to make. Here we have the Windows installer, so this shows that there is some action taking place on this device. So if we go to our start menu, you can see we have the Notepad++ have just been installed. So if I just type Notepad, you can see we have the Notepad++ have just been installed. Then we can also open it and then use it without any problem. So that is how you install software using the um, group policy management. But mind you, if you want to install big software like AutoCAD, I think it is not that advisable to install large software with, like, for example, 5 GB, 10 GB. It's advisable to use such deployment program like Microsoft Intune or Configuration Manager. Well, most companies at this time does not use. They only use the group policy to deploy very simple software, just like Notepad. But for major softwares, they use other programs like Microsoft Intune or some other deployment software programs. So this is how you deploy a software to your client operating system using group policy management from your domain server. It's time to create a group policy that will allow remote desktop connections for all users' computers. You know, users actually use remote desktop connection to connect to domain servers or even to connect to other client operating system. And also, you don't want to grant all users access to the remote desktop computers. You want to grant it to mostly your IT helpdesk users and of course your administrator. So if I go to my C001 device, which is a Windows client operating system, and I go to system and I go to remote desktop, you can see that the remote desktop is turned off. So what we want to do right now is to create a policy that allow remote desktop connection. So I'm going to go under my computers here. I want to create it for my computers. So I'm going to say, well, let me just create it for all my computers to allow remote desktop connection. Even if the remote desktop connection is turned on, but only specific users should be able to use it. So I'm going to create a GPU and call it enable remote desktop. Then if I right click, I will say edit. So right now I want to create a policy. It's going to be a computer configuration policy. So I'm going to go to policies. Under policies, I want to go to administrative template. Let me enlarge this. So on our administrative template, I want to go to Windows component. And here I'm going to search for remote desktop connections. And here you can see we have the remote. Let me enlarge this as well. We have the remote desktop session host, and then we have connections. So I want to allow users to connect remotely to this device. I'm going to just put configured by Kelvin Johnson, and then you can actually read the information here and then click OK. Well, that is just one step. Also, sometimes firewall rules block remote desktop connections. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the firewall rules the specific port is actually allowed on your domain environment. So next, we're going to allow the Windows firewall rules. So let me just go back again to Windows settings. Under Windows settings, I want to go to security settings. Under security settings, I want to go to my Windows Defender firewall with advanced security. And then here, we want to actually create a new inbound rule. So it's going to be a port rule we are creating. I'm going to click next, and we are going to allow a specific port, which is the 3389. I'm going to say next, and here I want to allow the connection. We can also deny, block the connection. So it's going to be for a domain environment, applies when a computer is connected to its corporate domain. So let me just say allow port 3389, then click finish. So we are still not done yet. We want to make sure that only specific users are allowed to connect via RDP. So what we want to do is the following. We also need to go to, let me just go back again. We also need to go to Windows settings, go to security settings, and here we have the local policies, and then we have the users right assignment, and here you want to actually you click the allow logon through remote desktop service and then click define. Here I'm going to say, let me just use domain users, which means all my domain users should be able to access. This is actually for this training purpose, but normally in a domain environment, you want to allow only specific domain users, for example, your IT help desk, your system engineers, network engineers, and your other engineers, who actually or specific advanced users that requires the remote desktop to connect to other device. So I'm going to click OK. So right now we have our policies. We've created our policy. Let me go back. We created our policy. Let me just try to enforce this policy. And then let's go back again to our device. Close. Then I'm going to open the command prompt. Then enter GP update pause. Let's try to update our policy. So by forcing the policy, if I go to my settings, if I go to settings under system and I scroll down to my remote desktop connection, you can see it says some settings are managed by your organization. So you can see this is great. I can't actually connect. I can't actually change anything from here, but it seems as if it is turned off. But if I go to my remote desktop connection and I try to connect to my DC, my Windows server, here we go, and I click connect. You can see that I should be able to connect to my Windows server without any issue. So which means that the policy is actually working and I'm able to connect to my Windows server without, here my Windows server is locked out, I'm locked out, and here I can actually connect to my Windows server without any issue. So let me just try to sign out. I'm just going to sign out from there so that I should gain access to my Windows 11 device again, and then I can be able to log on to my Windows server. So this is how you configure remote desktop connection the right way using all the different policies to make sure that users are able to access the remote desktop connection without any issue. And they can't actually change it, off it, or on it on their own without the help of an administrator with a group policy changes. We are going to learn how to install and configure BitLocker on a Windows Server 2025. So if you are working for a company or you are working for a very big or even small company, definitely most companies encrypt their client operating system using BitLocker. Like the company I work for, even if you insert a USB drive, that USB drive must be encrypted with BitLocker before you can even start to use it. So in this training, we are going to learn how to install BitLocker and how to configure BitLocker and also how to encrypt our Windows client operating system. So let's get started. First of all, you want to go to your server manager on a Windows server. It can be actually from a domain server or from a standalone server that is joined to a domain controller. So what I need to do, this is actually my domain controller. So I'm just using this for this training purpose. So you will need to go to your server manager and then click add roles and future. Then we need to click next. Here you want to actually select role-based features and then click next. And then we want to select the right server and then click next. So it's not actually a server roles. The BitLocker encryption is not a server role, it's a future role. So I'm going to go to features, and here you can see we have the BitLocker drive. I'm just going to select it. You can see it's going to add the BitLocker recovery password viewer and the BitLocker driver encryption tool. I'm going to add that. So we also have the BitLocker network unlock, which of course, with the BitLocker network unlock, you can use it to unlock devices should in case, for example, you are working during out of service hour and you want to actually restart that device, the unlock, make sure that the device is unlocked before you, and then you can continue working on that device before you can actually lock it back with BitLocker encryption. So we are not going to select that for now. I'm going to click next. I'm going to just select restart if necessary, then install. So let's wait for this to get installed and then we can come back again and then configure BitLocker. Here we go. You can see that my device is getting restarted to complete the BitLocker configuration. So let's wait. When the device restart, I'm going to log on, then we can continue. So here you can see I restarted my Windows server and it says view installation progress. Installation just got succeeded. So let me just see if we can open the, well, it's still actually, let's just wait for some seconds for this to fully complete. So this just got completed, but we can also install the BitLocker features using PowerShell scripts. Here you can see we're going to use the command the install Windows feature, which is BitLocker. So we're going to include all sub features and also include all management tools, and then we are going to restart our device. But I'm not going to do that right now. Not save, and then let's click close. Let me go to server manager again. So right now we've installed our the BitLocker encryption. So what we want to do next, we want to actually configure a group policy that will allow BitLocker to be encrypted on our client operating system. Right now, we just only install the feature, but if we didn't do any group policy or any changes, nothing is going to happen in our client on our client operating system. So we need to go to group policy management. In group policy management, I want to actually configure the policy under my computers because it's going to encrypt my computers. So here I'm going to go to my computers and then under I have an organizational unit I created in Active Directory, which is called computers. So here I'm going to create a GPO and link it here. I'm going to call this, let me just call this BitLocker policy and then click OK. So you want to let me just click OK for this. So you want to right click and then click edit. So when you click edit, then you want to go to the, let me expand this, go to policies. On our policies, you want to go to administrative templates. Here you want to go to Windows component. I think we have to expand this a little bit. And then we want to look for BitLocker drive encryption. So in the BitLocker drive encryption, you can see we have BitLocker drive encryption, freeze data drive, operating system, and removable data. So we want to actually select, let me see, let me just expand this. Okay, we want to store BitLocker recovery information in Active Directory domain service. So double click on that. I want to click enabled. And here it says recovery password and key packages. You can see we only have recovery password only, but we are going to do the recovery password and key passages. It says require BitLocker backup to Active Directory domain service. So that's the first step we need to do. Click apply and then OK. So after doing that, you can see we have other options, but you can also check all this yourself. But let's go to the operating system drive. So the operating system drive, we want to actually look for choose how BitLocker protected operating system drives can be recovered. I want to double click on that. And how are we going to actually recover the BitLocker key? So here we want to say is allow the 48 digits recovery password and also allow the 25-bit recovery key. So we have some other options, require 48 or require 25. Say save BitLocker recovery information to Active Directory for operating system drives. You want to select that as well. And here it says store recovery password and key packages. You want to also select that. Say do not enable BitLocker until recovery information. I'm not going to select this. So click apply, and then let me just put configured by Kelvin. So okay. And also, we also have for the removable data drives, you can see, but I'm not going to do it for this training purpose. So just try your possible best to see all the different options you have for BitLocker, and then also for your operating system, for your fixed data drives. So try to check what you have. So for your fixed data drive, we can also configure use of smart card on fixed data drives. We can also configure that, and first drive encryption type on fixed data we can also ensure to do full encryption, or we can also encrypt only use space. So right now we've actually configured our policy. Let me just try to enforce this. What we want to do is I want to go to my client operating system. So let's go and then apply the policy. Here we go. Our device have been restarted. I forgot to show you something. If I go back to our group policy, here on our operating system drives, you see, it says, for example, we can require additional authentication at startup, which means that when sometimes you observe when you try to log onto your device, you are required to enter a BitLocker PIN. So here you can require additional authentication at startup. We can enable it, allow TPM, allow startup PIN with TPM, allow startup key with TPM. So you can actually modify a lot with your BitLocker. So let's go back again to our client operating system. Here we have our C drive. Here you can see our C drive is not encrypted. So what we need to do, so this may take some time. Let's go to the command prompt and then do a GP update box. Let's try to force the policy on our device. So now let's try to turn on, you can see our policy has been completed. So let's try to turn on BitLocker on this device. So if I right click my device, you can see we have the turn on BitLocker. So it says save to a USB flash drive, save to a file, or print the recovery key. What we're going to do, we're just going to click next, because if okay, let me cancel this and show you something again. Let me just say turn on BitLocker. You can see it says a recovery key can be used to access the file, but at this moment it says save to a USB flash drive. We have all this option, but if I click next, it's going to actually save this to Active Directory. So I'm just going to say encrypt, use this space, which of course is going to go more faster. New encryption mode. I'm going to select the first option, click next. I don't want to run the BitLocker, so I want to start encryption. So this is going to take some time. It's just some few minutes or even not a minute. So let's just wait for this to complete and then we can see if our recovery key has been stored in Active Directory. Here we go. You can see that our encryption of our C drive just got completed. You can see right now our C drive is encrypted. So let's go back again to our domain server. And then I'm going to go to Active Directory users and computers. And here we go. We have our C drive. Let me do a refresh. If I double click, you're supposed to have a button. Here you can see we have a tab of BitLocker recovery. And if I go to the BitLocker recovery, you can see we now have a recovery key. That's our recovery password, and that is our device. And you can see which is today, and the recovery key has just been saved. So here is our password. Should in case someone the device is locked and you want to actually provide a password, recovery password to that user. So you can actually provide this recovery password to the user, and the user will use it to recover his device. Well, this is how you actually configure and manage your password or your recovery password of BitLocker in a Windows Server device. And also, these are the steps you are going to use to configure BitLocker. But mind you, you can also use Microsoft Intune. Most companies right now are switching to going to the cloud, so they are using Microsoft Intune to encrypt their device. Every single policies we just configured in a Windows Server environment can also be configured using Microsoft Intune. In this video, we are going to learn how to create and configure disk and volumes in a Windows Server 2025. Let's say you work as an IT system administrator and you were asked by your IT manager or your IT colleague to create a disk in a domain server or for example, your file server manager. So right now, if I go to, let me go to tools, and here we have computer management, or we can just right click, and you can see we have disk management. We can also manage it from computer management. So let me go to disk management. So if I go to disk management, you can see we have C drive, we have some extra system partition, which please, you can't even actually delete it. And we also have unallocated space. If I go to File Explorer, you can see we only have just one C drive. So from our unallocated space, we can decide to create a new simple volume. Let me just take 1 GB from here, and I'm going to call it let me just call this Kelvin. Without the name for now, you can see it says new volume. But we also have a disk. You can see that this new volume is inside this disk 0. So here you can see we have unallocated, but we have a different disk 1. So here we can decide to bring this, because this is actually offline at the moment. So we can decide to bring this disk online. So let's just wait for this disk to come online. And then let's try to initialize the disk. Here it says disk is going to be the partition table. Let me just do that for now. And we have a disk, a basic disk. You can see it says unallocated. So we have some options. You can see here we have different options because we are doing this from a disk. Here we have only new simple volume. We have new simple volume, span volume, strip volume. But if this is not available from here, for example, if I bring this, let me bring this back offline and try to see something. You can see we can only do new simple volume. We can't create a span, stripped, or mirrored volume. So I'm going to bring it back online and then try to create a new simple volume from this disk as well. Let me just create new one here and just take 1 GB. I'm going to call this data and then click finish. But at the same time, I can decide to create a new simple volume, and then let me just click next, assign the letter G, and then decide not to format this disk. And you can see when I didn't format, I don't have the option to give a name. I can right click and decide to say I want to format this disk. And now I can give this a name. Let me just call this software. Software. So we can now decide to actually format it. So we can decide to actually format it. So let me cancel this. So right now we can decide to just right click and then format. So we can decide to give this a name and call this software and then perform a quick format. You can see it says FAT, but we can change it to NTFS, and then the default, we can just leave it at the default and then click OK. Then click OK again. You can see it has been formatted. Now let's create one more disk again. I'm going to create a new simple volume. I'm just going to call, let me just take 1 GB again from here. So I'm going to call this, let me just call this H and then call this user data. Let's say we want to actually place all our users data in this disk. So I'm going to format it right now. And here it has been formatted. So what I want to do next is in this series of video, we are going to be creating mirrored and RAID volume later. But right now, let's try to see how to use disk path to actually manage one of our disk. So we're going to be seeing how to use disk path next using the command prompt. There are different methods to manage your disk. Which one of them is the disk management? But as an IT system administrator, it is actually a good practice to know how to manage your disk using the command prompt or PowerShell. That is where disk part comes in. So the disk part allows you to manage your disk just the way you will use the disk management. So if I go to the command prompt CMD and I go to CMD and I enter disk part, hit enter. I'm going to say, because you need to open it as an administrator, I'm going to cancel that for now. I'm going to do list disk. You can see it's going to show me all the different disks available, which is 0 and 1. So let's select disk 1. So if I select disk 1, you can see it's going to Disk one is now selected. Okay, we say disk one is now selected. And then if I enter detail disk, it's going to show me all the volume that have been created in this disk. You can see all the different volume that I've created. So right now we want to do the following. We want to actually create a new disk, a new partition, just like we did using disk management. So I'm going to do the following. I'm going to do create partition, primary size. Let's say I just want to do 1000 and hit enter. You can see right now it has been created. You can see the partition has been created. And if I just go back again and do detail disk, you can see we have a new volume which have not been formatted. So let me just select the volume 8. Now volume 8 is now selected, and now we can now format our disk. Let me use the NTFS, and then I'm going to give it a label name, which is going to be data disk 001. Then hit enter. You can see our disk have just been formatted. Then we've not assigned a letter yet, because if you look very well, all the disk already have a letter. So we need to assign a letter by just doing the following. Since I'm still selecting the disk volume 8, let me just do the letter. It's going to give you, let me just do K and hit enter and see. So it says this was successfully assigned. So this is going to take just some few seconds, and you can see our disk will be disk K. But if this is not the case, what you can actually do is here, you can go here. I think let's see and try to do a refresh. You can, there we go. You can see we now have disk K. So that is how you actually use your disk part to manage your disk. So if I go back again and I do, let me just go back to the last command. We use detail disk. Here we go, and you can see we now have our disk volume 8, which is deselected. You can see we have a data disk 001. So this is how you use disk part to manage your disk in Windows Server 2025. We are going to be discussing about disk in this session. So as you may know, we have different kind of volume or disk. For example, we have the spanned volume, stripped volume, and mirrored volume. So I'll be going into each of them step by step and tell you what they do, how many disks you need to actually configure spanned, stripped, or mirrored volume. So first of all, we have the spanned volume. So the span volume, you need two or more disks to combine into one larger volume. So the data is written into one disk at a time. Well, with the span volume, you have no speed, and also there is no fault tolerance. So if one of the disk dies or something happened to that disk, all information is gone. So you'll not be able to retain your information. Then we have the stripped or striped volume, which is called RAID 0. This also, you need two or more disks. It is actually very fast. There's also no fault tolerance. If one disk fails, all your data is lost. Then we now have the mirrored volume. So let's start with RAID 1. With RAID 1, you will need actually two disks. So the data is actually duplicated on two disks. If one disk fails, the data is still safe because you have your information or your data in the other disk, because the information or the data is actually duplicated among two disks. Well, the speed is actually better compared to your stripped volume and span volume. So we also have RAID 2, RAID 3, and other ones, but I'm going to talk about the RAID 5 volume. So with the RAID 5, you need three or more disks. That's when we are talking about data plus parity. So the information, your data is actually spread among three or more disks. Then we have fault. Fault is actually also fault tolerance, because the information is spread among the different disks. So if one disk failed, you still have other disks to recover your information. So there's a good balance of speed and safety. Well, you need three or more disks to be able to create a RAID 5 volume. So just put in mind for like span, you need 2 disks stripped, which is called RAID 0. You need 2 mirrored RAID 1. You need also 2 disks, while RAID 5, you need 3 disks or more. Well, just like I said, span and strip does not have fault tolerance, while mirrored RAID 1 and RAID 5 have fault tolerance. So to create a disk, a stripped or mirrored volume, what do you do on a Windows Server Manager? Here, if I go to let me just go to my settings. Under my settings, you can see I have different disks I've created. So you will need to attach multiple disks. I just created different disks, just 1 GB. So I'm using a virtual machine for this test, by the way. So what you can do is just add disk. Here you can click next, and then you can use Cozy or a different one, and then click next to create a new virtual disk. But mind you, I can also use the NVMe, but because this machine is turned on, so I'm using this exclusive. So you can just click next, create a new virtual disk, click next, and here we can actually just say, for example, I want to create a 1 GB, click next, save it on the location, give it a name, and then save it. You can see all the different disks I've created. Let me just click cancel for that. So you want to right click on your start menu and then click disk management. So when you click disk management, you can see it's actually asking me to initialize my disk, all the different disks I just added. So I'm going to just use the GPT, or we can use the master boot record. I'm just going to select OK. And here we go. You can see all my different disks has been created, and they are all online. At this moment, they are unallocated. And you can see we have our C drive, which is almost like 100 GB, and then we have 1 GB of different disks I created. Okay, first of all, what we want to do right now is the following. Here you can see we have about, let me see, I have about 8 disks I added. So I want to right click, and then you can see we have a simple volume, we have a span volume. So mind you, if I just, for example, I can actually shrink a volume here. Let me just shrink, let me try to shrink a volume, and I'm going to just do, oh, let me see if I can create, let me just use 2 GB and shrink that. And let me show you guys something. Here you can see we can still create a new span volume or new mirrored volume. Let me click next. You can see what happened. If I say new mirrored, I don't have the option to create a mirrored volume because I only have one disk. And this is actually on my basic disk where my C drive is. But here, let's try to create a new span volume. So when I click next, you can see I have the option to actually select multiple disks. We have the disk 1. So here I can add 2 disks to it because I need maximum 2 disks to be able to create a span volume. So I'm just going to click next, use the letter E. Then here we can actually give this a name. Let me just call this SPA001, just the name. So I'm going to perform a quick format, and we can also enable file and folder compression, but I'm just going to leave it for that. Click next and then finish. I'm going to say yes. So it's actually being created. It's going to take some few seconds, and here we go. You can see our span volume has just been created. So if I go to File Explorer on this PC, here you can see we have our span volume. So it's combining 2 disks at the same time. Well, if I put any info I put there, if something happened to one of these disks, mind you, this other disk is actually striping the information to both of the disk at the same time. So if something happens to this disk, automatically it's also affecting this other disk. So the same thing happens if I decide to create a striped volume. But let's try to create a mirrored volume. I'm going to say next. Now I want to add, what am I doing? I'm going to add 1 and add another one to it and add. Okay, here we have just 2. We can always create 2. And then let me just do this. And let me just do MO002 and perform a quick format as well. Click next and then finish. I'm going to say yes. So here we go. You can see that my mirrored volume has been created. But now let's try to create a RAID 5 volume. I'm going to say RAID 5. I'm going to select all the disk. You can see the other disks are not available because I've already used the other disk. But mind you, with RAID 5, we say we can actually use 3 or more disks to create a RAID 5. I'm just going to say next. I'm going to assign letter G to it, and I'm just going to call this. Let me just call this data 001, and then also perform a quick format, and then click finish. We'll say yes. So if I do that, let's just wait for some seconds for this to be created. Here we go. You can see that my disk has just been created. And here we go. You see, I'm using 4 different disks to create my RAID 5. So let's go to File Explorer and see what happens. So if I go to this page here, you can see I have all my different disks. Now, when you look at it, you would think that, for example, here we just have one disk. But you can see it's a combination of different disks at the same time, 3 disks. So if I create a new folder, let me just put this one, let me call this on my name. Here, what happens is this info is being spread across this 3 disk, this 4 disk. So if one of these disks tend to fails, for example, this disk can go offline, then my information will still be available. So which means I will still have my information available. But if, for example, on my SPA001, if I decided to create a folder here, for example, let's say we just call this data, and something goes wrong with my disk, automatically I'm going to lose all my information. So if something goes wrong with this disk, I'm going to lose every information because the information is actually being just striped to both of these disks at the same time. While with RAID 5, it's actually being stored on a different disk entirely. So these disks, they are all independent of themselves. So which if something happens to this disk, these 3 disks will still be available for me to recover my data. So this is how you create your mirror disk, your span volume, mirrored volume, RAID 1, RAID 5, even RAID 2 and RAID 3. This is how you create it using disk management on a Windows Server 2025. We are going to be discussing about Event Viewer in a Windows Server 2025. You know, Event Viewer is also in a Windows client operating system like Windows 11 and Windows 10. But let's first of all, if I just right click my start menu in my Windows Server, and here you can see we have Event Viewer. So what is Event Viewer? Well, let me just maximize this. So Event Viewer is a built-in Microsoft Management Console tool that record system, security, and application events. So if I go to Windows, you can see Windows log, you can see we have the applications, security, setup, and system. So it also helps administrator to troubleshoot problems and also track logins, errors, crashes, and policy changes that happens on your Windows server and also your client environment. So what does the event viewer actually monitors? So if I go to applications, here you can see it's going to actually give me a lot of info. You have more than 1,000 events. If this is a server I'm using regularly on a daily basis and the server is on 24/7, definitely you'll be having here more than 10 to 20, 30 thousands of application events. If I scroll down, here you can see we have, for example, we have Windows error reporting. You can see we have some warning, and also we have errors. So if you are working as an IT system administrator or an IT service desk engineer, you want to actually focus more on the error. So let's go to security. Security, here you can see it says audit. Here actually in security, you can actually see who logs on to this device and who actually logs off. Here you can see there's a logon, an account was successfully logged on. And if we scroll down, you can see it's going to give you more information of who that account is, what that account is, and more info about that account. You can see we have log on and we also have log off. For example, log off. Here you can also see an account was logged off. So you can see a lot of information. Here we have more than 31,000 record. Just like when I log on, log off, log on, every single information is being recorded in Event Viewer. So one thing the event viewer also do is also log on hardware or driver error. If, for example, there's an error when you try to install a specific driver, there's an error, it's going to actually log that event. Also, security violation and even software installation. So if I go to setup here, you can see we have a lot of information. But let me see. Okay, here we just have some package was successfully changed to the absence rate. And here you can see it says a reboot is necessary before the package Microsoft Windows. So here it's telling us about all the sort of setup of all installation that took place on our device. And if we go to system, you can see we have, for example, our time service, and you can have our, for example, our NTFS Microsoft Windows. So we have a lot of information about our disk, about our display, and more. But we also have some extra information. If I here we have applications and service log. If I just scroll on, just click the drop down and I click on Microsoft, here you can see we have a lot of more information. So here you can see we have information on what is going on behind the scene. If, for example, you are working with Microsoft Intune, definitely you're going to have info on MDM, the logon of MDM, every devices that tried to log on, every devices that did not log on. So every information will be recorded here in your event viewer. We have our DNS, DHCP, as you can see, we even have our backup. All info will be recorded in event viewer. So let me show you where the logs are saved. If I go to my disk, say my C drive, and we go to Windows, let's go to System 32 here, and then go to the Win event, double click on it. Here we have our logs. Here you can see all the different logs where they are saved. So if, for example, we decide to say, well, we want to actually clear this log because we need to applications, when you click, you can save it and clear it. Well, if I go here, let me just go up. So you can see we have the application log is there, which is about almost 1 MB. So if I clear the log, it's going to clear all the info there. If I go back there again, here you can see the log has just been cleared, which is about almost 1 MB, but it has been cleared to about 68 KB. So the 68 KB means that at this moment, there are no info in this log. And again, one thing I want to show you, let me go to setup. Let's see where I can find a kind of, I think application. Okay, I've already cleared all the log. Let's see if we have some error message. Well, if you are trying to troubleshoot with the an event, where you want to troubleshoot is not your warning. You want to actually check for errors. For example, we can decide to say, well, let's try to filter current log. I want to say, just show me only errors. And here we go. You can see you want to filter on errors, and every errors come sometimes with a code or with a specific error message. If I go to details here, you can see we have the details information about this error. So let's try something else and let's see. We have let me just scroll down a little bit. And here we have the TPM WMI. See the secure boot update field for update with error, %2. So here you can actually see it says computer. Sometimes if you want to search in Google what this error message is, you can just copy this info and then paste it in Google to see if someone have already got that error message in the past and how to actually fix that problem. But mind you, I will always advise, because sometimes if you are working with a Windows server and you have your log has been actually detailed, or you have your event log, you want to make sure that before you actually clear the log, for example, I can say I want to clear the log. Please always try and save before you clear the log. So we can save it to any location. Let me just save it here and just call it. Let me just call this server log and then click save. So automatically you can see it has been saved and then my log was cleared. So if I go back again to where I saved this log, you can see this is my log, which is about almost 27.8 megabytes. So here, let me close this. Let me close my log. Let me just close this log and then double click on this. Automatically, you can see it's trying to open this my saved log. You can see the saved log. It's trying to actually open that log file. And here we go. We have our saved log. But if I go back again to security, you can see we started building up some extra information about on this device. You can see it says log off, log on, but you'll be thinking, "Ah, I didn't actually log off from this device. How come we are logging off? We are having some log off information." Well, every single, for example, when you log off from a website, it's also triggered as log off, or when you log off from an application, it's also going to be saved as log off, or you log on to a specific application. So it's going to actually trigger, also show all the successful log on. So the same thing you can also do for others as well. You can also save and clear them, but please always try and save them before you log off or before you actually clear your log. Always try and save them because you may be requested for of that log information from your IT manager or from someone who says, well, something happens on this Windows server. We need that log information. Please, can you provide it for us? So if you have cleared this log and you didn't save the information, of course, you may be in problem or you may start cracking your head where to get this information. So, in conclusion, why is Event Viewer very important? Well, first of all, it detects system problems early so that the problem can be tracked and fixed. It tracks users' activities, it also track when users log onto that device or when they log off, and it also helps in forensic analysis, just like what I said. If something is happening in that company or something went wrong, they want to actually check where the problem is. They can do some forensic analysis. Also for required for server maintenance to check if the server required maintenance, so they can also check the log to see, well, okay, there's some issues for on this server. We need to maintain this server. We are going to be discussing about Windows updates on the Windows Server 2025. So if I go to my start menu and here I go to settings, on our settings here we need to go to Windows Update. Well, first of all, what is Windows Update? Windows Update is a Microsoft built-in service tools for keeping Windows operating system up to date, and its functions include the following. One, it checks for new updates released by Microsoft, download those updates automatically when approved, install security patches, bug fixes, driver updates, quality improvements, and future updates. And it also helps protect your system from known vulnerability and ensures software runs as intended. So here you can see it says Windows Update, and if I can actually just click install. You can see we have one security update, and then we can just click install, and the install will start downloading, and then it's going to install the update. Here you see it says installing. Probably this update has already been downloaded, and right now it's just installing the update. You see we have the option pause update. We can actually pause update for 1 week, 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or even 5 weeks. And here we have update history. So the Windows update types include, we have the security update, which fixes vulnerabilities. We have quality updates which are for reliability and performance improvement. We also have driver update, which of course is for hardware compatibility update. You know, if we have some hardware on our Windows server, the physical server, so they have to be updated as well. So also have feature updates, which include some significant OS changes or new capabilities or client versions. So here you can see the update is still installing, so this may take some time before the update can be installed. Well, if for example you try to start your update and your update is not starting, there's one thing you need to do to actually fix this issue. If I go to, let me just start services, this device. Oh, I think I write it wrongly. Services. Here we go. We have, let me just start services. And in services, let me go to standard. So here I will need to actually go to Windows Update. If I just scroll down here, we have the Windows Update. And you can see by default, it's actually set to manual and it's triggered. You can see the configuration. Let me double click on it. It's set to manual. We can actually set it to automatic. The manual means that sometimes the update is not started when your device starts. So if, for example, there's an update available, then it triggers the Windows Update service to start. So you can see it says running because, or if you click on the update, it's going to actually trigger your Windows Update to start. So let me just cancel that. And also, if your Windows Update is also not starting and you're having issues updating your device, what you need to do is if I go to Windows, here I go to Windows, and if I just scroll down, let me see under scroll down. Here we have the software distribution. So if I double click on it, you can see that if I go to download, these are the updates that are downloaded to my device. So if these updates have been downloaded, for example, like today, you can see we have an update which is being installed on this device. If you're having issues, for example, downloading update or installing the update, you can actually clear this folder. But what you need to, or you can even delete this folder, or you can just put point old, which is going to make it old. You need to stop the service first, stop the Windows Update service, and then delete this folder, or just rename this folder to a different name, and then start Windows Update again. Automatically, it's going to start the Windows Update service, and then recreate this folder to start downloading a fresh download of Windows Update. You see, it says installing 49%. Well, if you're working for a company, I'm just doing this because this is actually a test environment. If you're working for a company, definitely you will not be doing it manually. Your Windows Server will be updated using specific update tool like the Vesus Server, which is the Windows Server Update Service, which is which is installed on a Windows server, or you can also be using Microsoft Intune or Azure Update Manager to update your Windows Server and client operating system. So because like the Windows Update Service is actually a centralized patching management for Windows Server, so that for example, we can also use the configuration manager to update our client operating system or even our Windows server as well. But for big enterprise, I think at this moment most companies are actually moving towards Microsoft Intune and Azure. So this is actually just a tip of the iceberg on Windows Update on the Windows Server 2025. So if you are just starting as an IT system administrator, it is good for you to know all this basic information I'm saying, because with all this basic information, you cannot go deep into Windows up like the Visual Server I just mentioned, Microsoft Intune, to begin to learn how to actually manage your Windows Server using those tools than doing it manually. There is no company, except for example, the Windows Server is installed for the first time. Sometimes they want to install all the updates, required updates, like do some hardening on that Windows Server, do it manually. But most of the time, these are done using the update tool like the Vesus and also the Microsoft Intune or Azure Update Manager. Wow, wow, wow. This has been a very long video. If you have watched this video to the end, thank you very much for being part of this video, of this series. I believe you've learned a lot or the basic to become an IT specialist. Well, this is not just the end. When you study this video, definitely you are not going to be an expert. You still need to learn more. But I created this video just to get the basic of what you will need to extend your knowledge to the next step of becoming an IT professional. So if you have any comments, if you have any question, please just leave it in the description, in the comment section of this video, and I'll reply to you as quick as possible. And please don't forget, IT is not what you learn and forget. You continue to learn all the time. You understand? You need to update your skills. You need to learn the latest skills. Right now, everything is moving to the cloud, to moving to AI. We did not even discuss about the cloud in this video, but this is just to give you some of the basic you need to take you to the next level. And please, if you've watched this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me for more IT related videos. And if you think there are any videos you want me to create, just leave a comment in the comment section and I'll reply to you as quick as possible and I'll try my possible best to create that video. Thank you. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.